Welcome to Disclosure. I'm Mark Kelly. When something goes wrong at a medical clinic or a hospital, for some it's a natural instinct to blame the doctor. Now, it usually isn't the doctor's fault, but sometimes it is. And proving it is very, very difficult. That's partly because of a group you've probably never heard of. A group that's big, powerful, and rich, and very much in the doctor's corner. Meet the O'Reilly family, minus one. Betty's missing. She died of a drug overdose.
I phoned 911 and the next thing I heard was a crash. She fell off the toilet, and I went into the toilet. There was a yellow mucus all over, and she was dead as a doornail. And of course they were telling me, find a pulse, and I said, I can't find a pulse, she's dead.
Betty was no kid on chemicals. She died at her home in St. John, New Brunswick last April at the age of 68. She had a history of depression. The O'Reillys believe Betty's doctor overprescribed her antidepressants. So they're talking to lawyer Pete Mockler.
How many other people
It don't matter.
to?
We're the people that entrust their lives into these people's hands. And they're supposed to be the professionals. Say, okay, you have this, you have that, here's a cure. But when you overprescribe like that...
She had a tremendous buildup of this in her blood.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean.
She was getting 400 a day.
That's right.
400 a day, yeah.
That's what I think killed her, really.
Mike, his daughter Donna, and son-in-law Jerry want to sue for medical negligence, and they say they've got a smoking gun.
I got a coroner's report. They did an autopsy, and they told me in the report that she died of an overdose of nortriptyline.
The coroner's declaration clearly states that. And here's the clincher for the O'Reillys. Betty's psychiatrist had prescribed 8 times the manufacturer's approved dose for an elderly patient.
I think quite clearly that you have a cause of action, and the probability of success is very high. There are no guarantees in law. These doctors are almost invariably part of what they call the Canadian Medical Protective Association. They fight the cases very, very hard.
Right.
Pete Mockler says you need courage and cash, because when you fight a doctor, you fight the Canadian Medical Protective Association, the CMPA for short.
I judge it's going to cost $40,000 to $50,000.
That's a lot of money.
Well, it's a lot of time, believe me. And it's mainly a lot of time because the CMPA fights them so hard. They take the view that people who are suing doctors are basically in the extortion business.
Sounds outrageous, but that's what the editors of a medical journal said 100 years ago when the CMPA was first established. Most of these cases arise out of complete ignorance or from a desire to extort money, it read. Doctors therefore need a powerful and well-managed protective association to defend them. And that's exactly what they got. They may keep a low profile, but if you sue a doctor, it's nearly always the Canadian Medical Protective Association running the show. 95% of Canadian doctors are members. But Mike O'Reilly is still determined to take them on.
I'm not really interested in money, but what I would like is an apology from the doctors.
But that may be expensive to get that apology.
And that's what I mean. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
So we have to sue.
And if I've lost my wife, and I think I've got the stomach for it because of her death.
Meet lawyer Paul Hart, the insider. He may sue doctors now, but he used to help defend the CMPA's doctors. He knows how the system works.
It's driven by protect the doctor's reputation almost at all costs. If it's necessary, they will spend $100,000 protecting the doctor against a $5,000 claim.
So how far will the CMPA go to protect a doctor's reputation? The legal strategy is well worn. Deny the doctor did anything wrong, even when the negligence seems pretty clear. Like the surgeon who spilled a couple hundred gallstones inside his patient without even noticing. The CMPA blamed the patient's suffering on her troubled family life. Or how about the doctor who sparked a fire on the operating table, giving his patient second-degree burns? The CMPA blamed faulty equipment. Well, the judges weren't buying it. In both cases, they found the doctors negligent. Same goes for the obstetrician who left a 6-foot roll of gauze inside his patient, then to top it all off, tried to cover the whole thing up.
The doctor turned to the nurses and said, "Don't write this down, no paperwork on this," and then actually approached another nurse to try to make sure that she didn't squeal on him. That's malpractice.
Lawyer Thomas Berger thought so anyway, but the former BC Supreme Court Justice had to fight 4 years to prove it.
That's their strategy, and it's, I think, coordinated across the country, and it's intended to make these cases as difficult as possible for plaintiffs.
Berger was representing a young woman named Shannon Showbridge. Shannon did eventually win her case, but at a price. The 6 feet of gauze was one thing, the CMPA's lawyer was something else.
She's traumatized by the whole thing.
Too traumatized to even talk about it, say Shannon's parents, Vic and Trudy. Shannon told the court the medical complications had wrecked her career. The CMPA's lawyer went to town on her to reduce her compensation.
When she got into court, the lawyer really beat up on her. They more or less told her that because she was dyslexic, she wasn't bright enough to have a job.
Standard practice for the CMPA, says our insider Paul Hart, and they want to make sure everyone knows it.
Because of the way they defend cases, it has the side effect of dramatically reducing the number of medical malpractice cases that come forward.
The fact that these cases will be so costly and will drag on, is this part of a CMPA strategy?
There's no question that that is the result of the way that they have chosen to handle their cases.
Margaret Ross says the CMPA is just doing its job. She's the association's lead lawyer, a hired gun from a $400 an hour Ottawa law firm.
Physicians belong to the CMPA because they want to know that they will be vigorously defended.
The truth is, few medical malpractice plaintiff lawyers survive the CMPA's suffocating tactics and manage to get some compensation for their clients. This from a malpractice lawyer.
Is there a question?
Do you agree?
No. There is no ever deliberate attempt simply to delay the case.
There's never an attempt to do that.
No. What
There's
we
never
do,
an attempt to, quote, suffocate
no,
the plaintiffs.
no,
Never.
no.
Mike O'Reilly has heard enough.
I'm frightened. I'll be truthful, I'm frightened.
What are you frightened of?
The CMPA, I was told by Mr. Mockler yesterday, have $2 billion. And what can I do with an organization that has $2 billion and probably the finest lawyers in the country? And I feel defeated right away. I'm not going to sue anyone.
And how many more Mike O'Reillys are there out there? Well, no one knows for sure, but the only government report ever commissioned on the subject estimated less than 10% of legit cases of medical negligence are ever compensated. That was in 1990. Paul Hart says nothing's changed.
Probably 1 in 10 legitimate cases of medical malpractice go forward because of the costs associated with them.
And the other 9?
There's 9 people out there who have been injured through no fault of their own who are not being compensated.
The CMPA does pay up in around 400 cases a year, and it can afford it. It has that $2 billion war chest. That money's also used to pay for that vigorous legal defense. And you may be interested to know you, the taxpayer, are footing most of the bill. The doctors pay fees to the CMPA. Those fees are then refunded by the province. In Ontario, doctors get around 70% back. In BC, some fees are 100% refundable. Do you think that this is in the public's interest?
It certainly is in the public interest to have a fund that's available to compensate them if they are harmed as a result of medical care. Certainly it's in their interest.
And it's in the public's interest to have an aggressive legal team that will go and try to keep these claims out?
No, that's not what the legal team tries to do. I'm sure that your parents told you when you were growing up that there's always more than one side to a story.
There sure is. Meet 9-year-old Morgan Bystead and her grandmother Wendy. Morgan has spent all of her life in a battle with the CMPA.
Morgan has a central nervous system damage. She has cortical hearing and vision impairment. the information that's getting into the brain through the brainstem it doesn't happen. And of course she's a spastic quadriplegic, which means she can't walk, she can't sit up.
This is Morgan at birth, a picture of health. But Morgan's mother, Wiley, had the herpes virus, and baby Morgan started to show symptoms herself a few days after she was born. A cheap and commonly used drug would have quickly taken care of it. Left unchecked, though, the virus ravages an infant's brain.
We had taken her to the doctor. He knew what it was, diagnosed it correctly, and then didn't follow the proper procedure to remedy the situation. And that's why it's negligent, because he could have fixed this. I could be standing at the window watching both my children play outdoors. He had the choice to make a difference, and he didn't.
Thomas Harding took on Morgan's case 7 years ago. He's since set up his own law firm and remortgaged his own home to keep the case afloat.
The one thing that, in this case, the other side never counted on is I'm crazy.
Harding says the CMPA's lawyers have at least been consistent on one thing. Whatever caused Morgan's problems, it wasn't their doctor's fault.
We have these jokes, you know, if my dog bit you, it wasn't my dog. You weren't bit. It wasn't you. The dog was drunk. You know, you goaded the dog. You bit the dog. And that's the kind of defense you get from the CMPA. So they said that there was nothing wrong with Morgan. If there was something wrong, it was from something else. And then they said it was Mom's fault. And then they actually said it was Morgan's fault.
It's true. In their statement of defense, CMPA lawyers told the court Morgan should have taken better care of herself. She was 10 days old at the time. For years, the CMPA argued the doctor had done nothing wrong, but they junked that argument on the eve of the trial. Then they claimed Morgan had been infected in the womb, the damage done before she was even born.
If Morgan had been infected, according to what they said, she would have been born either with a head the size of a golf ball or a pumpkin on her shoulders. She would have been covered with bright red blisters or covered with scars or both. And she probably would be missing major organs like liver, spleen, kidneys, and she might not have had developed limbs. Well, she looked perfect, so what they said couldn't be true.
It's standard CMPA practice, says Harding. Deny everything, drown plaintiffs in paperwork and expert opinions, and watch their legal bills grow.
If there was any willingness on their part, you know, to settle this case or to settle cases in which there's clear negligence, we wouldn't even be here. We have tried to settle with them. We even sent over a lot of our research in an effort to get them to the table to talk about it.
Shall we go?
The CMPA said, see you in court. It was a costly decision.
There.
Morgan was awarded around $2.7 million for ongoing care. The combined legal bills could be another $2 million. But it's not over yet. The CMPA appealed, prolonging the case even more. So the judge ordered an interim payment of $9,000 a month. The CMPA fought that too. I want to be clear. You feel that if a doctor injures a patient, that patient should be compensated?
If there is negligence, absolutely.
Let's talk about the case of Morgan Bystad. You maintained for 2.5 years that the doctor's behavior in this matter was appropriate.
This was a very complex case on causation.
Well, in the causation, I mean, your lawyer was blaming the plaintiff. The plaintiff was 10 days old.
But this is the case where the judge actually said, and you know, I'm not sure what you're hearing or where you're hearing it from, but it's very interesting that the court said that this case was extremely well argued, extremely well presented, and that the experts were very well prepared and offered helpful evidence to the court.
But the case is still going. You're appealing it.
Well, that's right.
This girl is now 9 years old.
There are appeal rights as part of the judicial process, and as I was saying earlier, you know, we offer through the CMPA vigorous defense to professionals.
You know how many chances you have of winning an appeal where you appeal on the facts? 1 in 1,000. So they know they've lost. They just don't want to pay the money. The only thing I can figure out is they're hoping Morgan will die, because if she dies, they walk away scot-free.
Is there no compassion for a victim?
Everyone has compassion for a victim. These cases are tragic.
But when the judge ordered interim payments as a result of failed to treat properly, which has been admitted here, you appealed that. She's got nothing. She hasn't had a nickel.
Well, but if they're successful on the appeal, there will be very significant funds available. But there are appeal rights.
I mean, the moral thing is when people make mistakes that they repair them, that they make some reparation, or that they don't do any more damage. And that's just not the case.
Recently, Morgan Bystead finally got a little bit of good news. The first of those interim payments arrived just in time for her 10th birthday. Now, the CMPA's appeal of her case is scheduled to be heard in May. That is, unless they ask for a postponement. Oh, and one last thing, for anyone even thinking of suing their doctor. Remember Mike O'Reilly? He wanted to sue his wife's psychiatrist, but their family doctor could have been dragged into the case, so that doctor dropped him as a patient.
What do you got there, Mike? What's that?
Oh, I got myself a letter dismissing me as a patient. She said on the advice of her lawyer, she had to dismiss me. My counselor told me, he said, Mike, he says, you know, the shortage of doctors in St. John, he says, and we can't do nothing for you whatsoever.
So now he doesn't even have a doctor. And all Mike ever wanted was an apology.